Brothers and sisters, sons and daughters, welcome once again to the broadcast. Let us observe a moment of silence for those who have passed these last few weeks. Our problems are not their problems anymore. Finally, before we begin, let us offer a short, silent prayer for peace. I come to you this week not with thoughtful words for my allies in the coalition, nor accusations for my enemies in the syndicate. This week, I have words of warning, words of caution, words of perspective for the neutrals, those who feel they are apart from this conflict of our times. As many of you have heard, Trader Jack and his friends in the trading company have recently stated their intention to remain neutral in matters between the coalition and the syndicate. You've heard them call the coalition oppressors because we tell them not to trade with cannibals like the Dark as Midnight gang. They say, Dark as Midnight doesn't tell us we can't trade with you. They tell us that what they do to the other people outside the trade post is none of our business. They say they only desire the freedom to trade with whoever they want. They say they want to be neutral. What is being neutral? It's just not choosing a side. That shouldn't be a big deal, right? In matters where sides are equal, it should not. In trivial matters, no, it should not. In matters of what game of cards to play, or what book to read, or whether to eat chicken or steak, neutrality is a perfectly sensible and moral position. But in the conflict between Dark as Midnight and the good folk of Chernarus, no. There can be no neutrality. The Dark as Midnight gang are not oppressed. They are the oppressors. They do not come for justice or even revenge. They do not come out of need or desperation. Hex and his fiends come because they are sick. Because in their own words, Dark as Midnight considers everyone an enemy. Because they do whatever their greed, hatred, or lust for destruction drives them to do. Their words, not mine. These positions are not equal in merit to the position of a person who doesn't want to be brutalized by Hex's thugs and instead live in peace and safety. If our positions are not equal in merit, then what they are visiting upon us is injustice. Jack, Ricky, Jay, Felix, all of you, I understand your desire not to get involved. You're afraid. You've been hurt before, and you don't want to suffer now. Sitting on the fence feels safe. You ain't looking to be heroes. You ain't looking to rock any boats. Just eke out a comfortable living. Let me tell you a story that a bishop from Boston used to tell every year to his congregation. The story of Kitty Genovese. In 1964, in Queens, New York, the greatest city on the face of the earth, Kitty came home from a hard day's work in the bar that she managed. She was attacked in her apartment's parking lot by an assailant who had followed her home. He stabbed her multiple times, and she cried out for help, screaming as she watched the lights of the nearby apartments come back on. And do you know who helped her? Nobody. Nobody helped her. A woman begged for mercy, screamed in pain, and was ignored for over half an hour while she was raped and eventually murdered. Her neighbors heard her screams, but they did not come to her aid. Let that sink in for a minute. The bishop would tell his flock this story to warn them that the indifference of good men is one of the darkest forms of evil. But hey, maybe he had it wrong. Maybe Kitty's neighbors were not good men. Maybe they were just neutral. Sitting on fences does not work, because when push comes to shove, you will always fall on one side or the other. What about famously neutral Switzerland? Even in World War II, they were a neutral safe haven, were they not? Refusing to fight and friendly with both the Axis and the Allies, right? Actually, right up until the end of the war, the Swiss government laundered hundreds of millions of dollars in stolen assets, including gold, stolen from Europe's central banks and Holocaust victims. They laundered it for the Nazis. Tell me, brothers and sisters, do you think that the survivors of the Holocaust looked at Switzerland's willingness to help the Nazis rinse the blood from that gold as neutral? Did the profit that they made keeping the vast majority of that stolen gold after the war soothe the fractured spirits of those who walked out of those death camps, their lives in shambles? I can tell you what one survivor, a Nobel laureate, Elie Wiesel, had to say about neutrality, about staying out of the affairs of others. We must take sides. Neutrality helps the oppressor, never the victim. Silence encourages the tormentor, never the tormented. In fact, this view of neutrality in the face of injustice and oppression as an impossibility is not new. It is a view that has been expressed time and again by some of the world's great moral leaders, from anti-apartheid activist Desmond Tutu to Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. himself, who said the hottest place in hell is reserved for those who remain neutral in times of great moral conflict. An individual who accepts evil without protesting against it is really cooperating with it. Wise words. Older still, and those quotes from our great moral leaders, are the writings of the great poet, Dante Alighieri, who in his book, The Inferno, wrote that those who refused to choose a side between good and evil occupied the entry to hell itself, separate and apart from the condemned inside, saying, Heaven will not have them, and the deep hell receives them not, lest the wicked there should have some glory over them. In other words, brothers and sisters, looking at these neutral people, the wicked of hell would be able to feel that there were souls there worse than themselves. Worse, because they had committed the sin of squandering this gift from God, our very lives. Squandered it, not taking sides, waiting to see who would be the victor, pretending that they saw no difference between good and evil. Even older still, the good book instructs us not to deceive ourselves. In the second letter to the Corinthians, chapter 6, verses 14 through 18, Paul the Apostle wrote, Do not be unequally yoked with unbelievers, for what partnership has righteousness with lawlessness? Or what fellowship has light with darkness? What accord has Christ with Belial? Or what portion does a believer share with an unbeliever? What agreement has the temple of God with idols? For we are the temple of the living God. As God said, I will make my dwelling among them and walk among them, and I will be their God, and they shall be my people. Therefore go out from their midst, and be separate from them, says the Lord, and touch no unclean thing. Then I will welcome you, and I will be a father to you, and you shall be sons and daughters to me, says the Lord Almighty. There is good, and there is evil. In matters such as those spoken of tonight, in the war between the free people of the North against our southern oppressors, you cannot sit on the fence in the face of this injustice, for doing so is in fact standing with the oppressors who have delivered evil unto us. Wake up, brothers and sisters. Wake up. You have a choice to make. Good night, and go with God.